Welcome to the Real Assessments of Reynolds. The purpose of this workshop is to equip you with knowledge and strategies to implement performance-based, problem-based, and authentic assessment in your courses, and by doing so, enhance student engagement, promote deeper learning, and to better evaluate student competency in real-world contexts. So our objectives are to define those three types of assessment: performance-based, problem-based, and authentic, and to differentiate between them, to recognize the benefits of using these forms of assessments, and to develop a plan for aligning these assessments with your course objectives, and to reflect on the strategies for successful implementation. So we're going to start with brief introductions and then go into understanding the assessment types, designing them. We'll have a short activity, then some time for questions and answers before we close. So when we look at traditional versus authentic assessment, our traditional assessments are those things like exams, tests, quizzes, and standardized tests. Our authentic assessments or alternative assessments are performance-based, problem-based, and authentic or practitioner assessments. So just take a moment and think about the current ways that you're assessing your students. How are you currently assessing your students? Do you feel like it would fall more in the traditional, more in the alternative, maybe a mix? So when we look at examples of alternative assessments, in an engineering course, we would have things like designing a prototype to solve a real-world problem. In our literature course, we could have something like analyzing text to produce original interpretations. And in nursing, simulated patient care scenarios. So these types of assessments are applicable across disciplines. It's not just limited to the CTE disciplines, or even the STEM disciplines. Your humanities, history, art, literature can use these as well. When we look at performance-based assessment, we're looking at students demonstrating knowledge and skills by performing tasks or creating products. And again, we have some more examples here. So in music, a performance, a recital, having an audience listen to what they've learned to play would be a performance-based assessment. In a computer science class, actually developing a piece of software would be a performance-based assessment. In art, creating a portfolio of the work that demonstrates each of the things that they have learned would be a performance-based assessment. So again, not just limited to our trades-based courses or our STEM-based courses. This is applicable across disciplines. When you look at problem-based assessments, it's learning to solve complex real-world problems. So things that are out there that are happening, like in a business course, developing the marketing strategy for a startup. In environmental science, proposing solutions for climate change. And in history, again, we kind of think of history as a lot of facts, and there's really no room for that analysis piece. It happened, but making that connection between historical events and how we can use history to understand what's happening currently would be a problem-based assessment. Our authentic assessments are those that what a practitioner would do, how a practitioner in that field would use the knowledge and skills that have been learned in the course. So in journalism, publishing, writing, in an advanced journalism course, starting a school newspaper and making the class responsible for putting that out. In education, creating lesson plans, teaching, actually getting in there and doing what teachers do, even if it's just simulated and amongst each other, given that opportunity to stand in front of a group, present the plan, adjust when things don't go your way. That practitioner role, taking that on. And in law, mock trials, giving students the opportunity to participate as the prosecution and the defense, to do civil and criminal type trials, just so they can get a feel for what it's like. If they're too early in their career for that, maybe doing some paralegal style work, something where your boss, the lawyer, needs you to review this brief and look up certain cases and have them do that in a way that is authentic to what a paralegal would do. So this is just a chart that compares the three types of alternative assessments, what they focus on, the kind of task, and our outcome. So you can see for performance-based assessments, it's a demonstration of skills, it's a practical task, and the outcome is a tangible product, a thing. With our problem-based, it's a problem-solving task, hits that analytical area, and the outcome is a solution. In our authentic, we're looking at making sure we're focusing on the real world. It's the contextual task. It's a task that changes based on the criteria, and the outcome is skills that could be used in the professional realm. So looking at those types of assessments, take a moment and think about which is most applicable to your area, and which one you would most like to move your assessments towards. If you're still thinking, you can pause the video, give yourself a little bit more time. No matter what kind of assessment we use, whether it be traditional, alternative, and within alternative, performance, problem, authentic, we want to make sure it is aligned to the learning objectives of our course, making sure that we're measuring what we intend to measure and what we're telling students we're measuring. So in math, students will be able to apply the fundamental theorem of calculus to compute definite integrals and understand the relationship between differentiation and integration. If we were to give an assignment consisting of problems where students evaluate definite integrals using the fundamental theorem of calculus, finding antiderivatives, applying limits of integration, and interpreting results within real-world contexts, such as calculating area under a curve representing a physical phenomenon, that would match up because we're asking them to compute those integrals, to understand that relationship between them. That's what we're looking for when we look at alignment. Here's a non-example. Students will demonstrate proper installation and safety procedures for residential wiring to compliance and national electrical codes. If we then just give students a written test on the principles of electromagnetic fields and quantum mechanics, even though they might be solving complex equations, the standard says to demonstrate, not to identify, not to recognize, not to calculate, but to demonstrate the installation and safety procedures. So this would be more aligned to a performance-based assessment. Again, even if it's a simulation, I know there's a product called Packet Tracer, that's for networks. But there are simulation softwares that allow you to simulate the circuit so that you're not going to burn anybody's house down, but you still get that experience with matching the wires to where they need to go. So for these next ones, just take a moment and look at each of these three examples and decide if you think they're aligned or misaligned. And again, if you need more time, feel free to pause the video, look at them a little bit more close, and decide about the alignment. So for example 1, I would consider this to be misaligned. It starts out well, analyze and interpret statistical data, and we are calculating our summary statistics, the mean and standard deviation. But this second part says to make informed business decisions, and there's no opportunity for that based on the description of the assessment here. For example 2, this would be an example of an aligned assessment. Everything matches up, drafting technical documents, detailed technical report, industry standard software, appropriate software tools, formatting guidelines, formatting standards. Everything that's present in the objective is present in the assessment. So for number 3, this again I would consider to be misaligned. It does talk about thermodynamics, the principles. This assessment, though, is focused on the development and the key sciences, whereas the objective is solving problems involving heat transfer. So this would be foundational knowledge, maybe something you wanted to cover in a pre-test to see if you needed to teach that, but it would not be an aligned assessment for that objective. So when we look at designing effective assessments, we want to start with our learning outcome. Always start with your objective. Look at what that objective wants students to know and be able to do, and then select the appropriate assessment type. Because sometimes the traditional assessment is the appropriate type based on the learning objective. But sometimes you need to venture off into one of the alternative assessments. No matter what kind of assessment you're using, make sure you develop clear success criteria and rubrics so students have clear expectations and a clear understanding of what success looks like.